sex symbol becomes a thing. I don't like being a thing. I always thought symbols were things you clash together. But if I'm going to be a symbol of anything, I'd rather it be sex than some other things there are symbols for. I know how they'll remember me. Here lies Marilyn Monroe, 34, 24, 36. But anyway, they'll remember me. My birth certificate reads Norma Jean Mortensen. My mother's name was Gladys Monroe Baker, and my real name was Norma Jean Baker. They changed it when they decided to build me up. They change whatever they want to.
Norma Jean's mother, Gladys Monroe Baker, worked in the film industry as an editor.
I was a mistake. My mother didn't want to have me. I probably got in her way. I know I must have disgraced her. A divorced woman had enough problems in getting a man, I guess, but one with an illegitimate baby? I wish she had wanted me.
Gladys's first husband, Jack Baker, deserted her, taking their 2 children. Her second husband, Ed Mortensen, vanished after a few months of marriage. Her boss, Stanley Gifford, got her pregnant. Gifford wanted nothing to do with her.
I don't remember seeing my father. I've been told he was a tall, thin man, and that he was killed in an auto accident before I was born. So that's what I always told people.
Norma Jean's grandfather died insane. When Norma Jean was 14 months old, Grandmother Monroe was hauled off to the state asylum where she died 19 days later. Now Norma's mother was slowly losing her own grip, becoming vague and depressed. Gladys placed Norma Jean with a religious family, the Bolanders. Their influence gave Norma Jean her first favorite song.
Yes, Jesus loves me. When I was a little girl, I often had this dream. I walked the length of the church with no clothes on, with no feeling of wrong or shame. I think I wanted people to see me naked because I was ashamed of the clothes I had on. Dreaming of people looking at me made me feel less lonely.
Work didn't leave Gladys time for Norma Jean, who knew her as the lady who sometimes took her to the beach. Gladys's best friend, Grace McKee, volunteered to take in the little girl.
Grace was captivated by Jean Harlow, so Harlow was my idol too. I used to play act all the time. It meant I could live in a more interesting world than the one around me. I read signed stories and fan magazines and believed every word the stars said in them. Then I'd try to model my life after the lives of the stars I read about.
Gladys bought a small house in Hollywood for herself and Norma Jean.
She seldom spoke to me except to say, "Don't make so much noise, Norma." Even when I was lying in bed turning the pages of a book, even the sound of a page turning made her nervous.
The house was less than a mile from Hollywood Boulevard.
I used to go down to Groman's Chinese Theater and I'd say, "Uh-oh, my foot's too big, I guess that's out." I'd stay there the whole day and part of the evening in the first row. A little girl all alone looking up at the giant screen, and I adored it.
Gladys rented out half of the house to an old couple from England, who encouraged Norma to use good diction.
When I was 9, I came home from school and the Englishman took my hand and said, "Your mother's taken ill today. She's gone off to hospital for a while."
Gladys Monroe remained mostly in institutions until her death 40 years later. Even though several families wanted to adopt her little girl, she would never allow it.
I knew I was different from other children because there were no kisses or promises. Nobody ever called me their daughter. No one ever told me I was pretty. All little girls should be told they're pretty, even if they aren't. I had 11 or 12 sets of foster parents. Some kept me longer, others got tired of me in a short time. I must have made them nervous or something. I always tried to please the people I lived with. I was afraid they might throw me out. They may not have wanted me, but it was better than the home. That was like a prison. Besides, I wasn't really an orphan. All the other kids had parents that were dead. I had at least one parent. but she didn't want me. When they led me up to the doors, I kept screaming, "But I'm not an orphan! I'm not an orphan!"
Grace McKee remarried and could now fulfill her promise to Gladys. The family took Norma out of the orphanage and into their home for the next 5 years. Norma's fears of being unwanted were balanced by a new sense of stability. She became bubbly, assertive. She also grew from a little girl into a young woman.
In high school, the other girls would ask me, "Why do you walk down the hall that way?" I guess the boys must have been watching me and it made the other girls mad. But I said, "I don't know what you mean. I learned to walk when I was 10 months old and I've been walking this way ever since." Suddenly, everything opened up. I had this long walk to school, 2.5 miles there, 2.5 miles back. It was sheer pleasure. Every fella honked his horn, workers doing work, waving, and I'd wave back. The world became friendly.
During her high school years, she began fantasizing about her father. She imagined he was like Clark Gable and would one day come for her. But Grace's family was moving back east. They could not take Norma Jean out of state, and Gladys would never permit adoption. Slyly, Grace encouraged a friendship between Norma Jean and the boy next door, Jim Doherty.
Grace had to beg his mother to make him take me to this dance. He was 19 and already had lots of girlfriends his age. He had been a big shot in high school. I was at the same one, and a nobody. Grace didn't give me a choice. She was leaving town and she wanted to make sure I would be taken care of. It came down to the fact that I had to either marry Jim or go back to living in the orphanage. What could I do? I got married. I tried to tell her I wasn't in love, and she said, "You'll be in love after you get married. Just do what I say." I did, but I never fell in love.
I guess she thought this would be very enchanting. I thought it would be pretty enchanting myself. She was a good cook, and I recall that she always liked to mix carrots with peas because of the color. Not because she liked to eat them, but she just liked the color of them. They look good on a plate.
Actually, our marriage was sort of a friendship with sexual privileges. I later found out that marriages are often no more than that, and that husbands are chiefly good as lovers when they're cheating on their wives.
Jim Doherty joined the Merchant Marine and was assigned to an island base off the California coast.
Out on Catalina, it was incredible. Gee, with all those guys staring and grinning. All my life I was ignored. Now I started looking at myself in the mirror to see what was so great. Jim was proud. Then he got worried. He didn't trust me, and I guess he was right.
Jim shipped out to sea. Norma Jean took a job in an airplane factory.
It's difficult to remember what I did or said or felt during a period when I was dying of boredom.
Army Signal Corps photographer David Conover was looking for wholesome American girls to boost GI morale overseas.
He wasn't kidding about how I ought to be a model. Then I found out a girl could make $5 an hour modeling, which was a lot different from working 10 hours a day at the plant.
The Blue Book Modeling Agency took her on, shooting test footage to show potential photo clients. Working out of the Ambassador Hotel, modeling agent Emmeline Snively helped Norma Jean establish her sense of self.
The truth was that, for all my lipstick and curves, I was as unsensual as a fossil. But I seemed to affect people otherwise.
On her second assignment at Malibu Beach, she was fired by an ad agency.
They said no one would ever look at the clothes in the catalog. Miss Snively said to me, "Norma, dear, it's just that you have too much sex appeal to make a fashion statement."
Jim Doherty received notice of his divorce while at sea.
You know, I never knew Marilyn Monroe. I knew Norma Jean Doherty, Norma Jean Baker. But Marilyn Monroe and Norma Jean were two different people. Norma Jean was my wife. Marilyn Monroe was a glamorous movie star. I don't know anything about her life. I never talked to her. I just didn't know her.
We hardly spoke to each other. We had nothing to say. Jim was a good husband. He didn't hurt me.
Her mother surfaced briefly, even living with Norma Jean for a few months. Gladys would wander off for days at a time. She voluntarily returned to the sanitarium. A young Hungarian photographer named André de Dienz convinced Norma to join him on a driving trip to capture her natural American beauty along with that of the rugged West. She wasn't in love. He was.
When I started modeling, it was like part of the job. All the girls did it, and if you didn't go along, there were 25 girls who would. Sex is a part of nature, and I go along with nature.
At Miss Snively's suggestion, she went from dirty blonde to golden blonde, which photographed better.
I appeared mostly on men's magazines. I was Norma Jean Doherty one month, the next I was Jean Norman. I don't know what other names they used, but I must have looked different each time. There were different poses, indoors, outdoors, but mostly just sitting looking over the Pacific. That brought out the swimsuit idea. You didn't see much ocean, but you saw a lot of me. One of the magazines was Family Circle. You buy it in the supermarkets. I was holding a lamb with a pinafore. I was the one with the pinafore. On most covers, I had on things like a striped towel because the cover was in color and the stripes were in color. That was right after my divorce. I needed to earn a living bad. I couldn't type. I didn't know how to do anything.
For 3 years, she was a favorite of artist Earl Moran, who transformed near-nude photos into painted pin-ups. The gay expressions disguised long hours and hard work. Jeannie Carmen, model, and later a friend of Marilyn.
If you love to pose, and I did right from the beginning, they had a way of getting out of you sexual expressions combined with sweetness and a lot of glamour, which they don't do too much anymore. You get so screwed up in your body because you have to get like a pretzel, and then you have to stay there and not move for hours on end. And you can hardly walk when you get through with the shoot, especially when you're doing all that stretching and arching.
The minimum wage in 1947 was 75 cents. Nude modeling paid $10 an hour. But assignments were sporadic. Miss Snively told Norma she could be more financially secure with a studio contract.
I went over to Fox Studios. Ben Lyon was in charge of talent. When he first saw me, he said I reminded him of Jean Harlow and a girl named Marilyn Miller. When they considered a new name for me, I asked if I could keep my mother's maiden name, Monroe. The same evening, some kids asked me for an autograph, and I didn't even know how to spell Marilyn.
Philippe Hollisman took a group portrait of 8 new starlets. Canadian Lois Maxwell became semi-famous as Miss Moneypenny in the James Bond films. Exotic Laurette Louez gained a cult following for the ludicrous movie Prehistoric Women before retiring. Kathy Downs would be trapped in Turkey's Like Amazing Colossal Man. Of the 8 hopefuls, only one seems as in love with the camera as the camera is in love with her. The young starlet's inauspicious debut as an actress came in 1948.
What's the smallest part you ever had?
Scudda who, scudda hey.
Was that all you had to say?
No, in a picture called Scudda who, scudda hey, I had one word to say. I said hello, but it went fast. In fact, they cut it out.
She met Joseph Skank, one of the founders of the studio. His luster had dimmed in 1942 when he was sent to prison for payoffs to mafia goons who controlled the stagehands union. His prison term reduced his studio clout. The major player was Darryl F. Zanuck, who was suspicious of Marilyn's relationship with Skank.
He had me come over to his house. It was a mansion. That's where I learned about champagne. I liked hearing about the stars I had seen in the movies. He knew them all. Fairbanks, Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, Valentino, everybody.
One star Skank had known very well was silent actress Norma Talmadge, his wife of 8 years, the actress who inspired the name Norma Jean.
What could I say? He didn't ask me to do much since he was getting old. Sometimes he'd just fall asleep. All the other girls thought I really had it made. Ha! I kept going back. At least the food was good.
She got a few lines in a B picture about juvenile delinquency, but Fox dropped her contract. Joe Skank made no attempt to intervene, nor did she ask him to.
My first contract with Fox was like my first vaccination. It didn't take.
She continued acting classes and even played a movie star in a small play, glamour preferred. Finally, Skank lent an indirect hand. He convinced his old friend Harry Cohn, head of Columbia Pictures, to give Marilyn a short-term contract. The transformation of Marilyn continued. The makeup department gave her hair a Rita Hayworth style. The resultant film, Ladies of the Chorus, gave Marilyn her first major role. Her first film would be a musical, but her voice was untrained. Vocal coach Fred Karger took charge and worked with her. This time, she fell in love.
Anyone can see I love you. Anyone can see I care. The way I hold your hand and smile in your direction tells the world my heart is filled with nothing but affection. Lock me in your arms forever.
I tried to understand why life was so different from how it had been before him. Nothing had changed. No hope, no work in prospect, all doors shut. My problems were still there, but they'd become like a heap of dust swept into a corner.
Karger did pay for a dentist to straighten her front teeth.
Every baby needs a daddy.
But Karger knew her career came first. That was not what his son needed for a mother. He also disapproved of Joe Skank and the other men.
But where's the one for me? Rich or poor, I don't care who.
Columbia also assigned their drama coach Natasha Lattès. The older woman saw Marilyn as a potentially fine actress.
If other beginners knew how awful I was when I started, they'd certainly be encouraged. In the end, I decided that I wouldn't let my lack of confidence get the best of me.
You'll be sure to send this right away, won't you?
Wouldn't you rather deliver it in person?
No, thanks. Miss Martin.
Yes. Well, aren't you going to give me the orchid?
The orchid. Oh, yes, the orchid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And your name's still not on the card?
It's Randy.
It's Randy what?
It's Randy what? Oh, Randy Carroll.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Carroll.
Thank you.
I kept driving past the theater with my name on the marquee. I just wish it had said Norma Jean so the kids at the home and at school who never noticed me could see it.
Harry Cohn was unimpressed, but invited her to a yacht party. Just her, him, and his sailors.
Joe Skank was like Clark Gable in comparison. Mr. Cohn wasn't even the kind who said hello first. For him, women were slaves.
She turned down the yacht party. Cohn canceled her contract. She was alone again.
If 100% of the experts in Hollywood told me that I had no talent and I should give up, then 100% of them would be 100% wrong.
The Marx Brothers, who hadn't made a film together in 5 years, were reuniting for Love Happy.
Groucho told me they needed a girl who could wake up his declining sexual appetites. He had each of us walk away from him, and I was the only one he asked to do it twice. Groucho whispered, "You have the prettiest ass in the business." I'm sure he meant it in the nicest way. I was only supposed to walk in the movie, but Groucho said he would write some special lines for me.
Is there anything I can do for you? What a ridiculous statement.
Mr. Grunion, I want you to help me.
I have a little sand left. What seems to be the trouble?
Some men are following me.
Really? I can't understand why.
Producer Lester Cowan ended up selling advertising space for the comedy climax because the film ran out of money. So did Marilyn.
I was behind in my rent at the Hollywood Studio Club, where girls live who hope to crash into the movies. You're only supposed to get 1 week behind in your rent. They must have felt sorry for me because they'd given me 3 warnings. So I called Tom Kelly, a photographer I knew, and said, "How soon can we do it?"
When I first asked her to do it, why, she turned me down. But after thinking it over for a few days, why, she came back and said, I would like to do it. I think it was partially a favor. I had done her a favor once before, and she really did need the money.
It didn't take long. I mean, it takes longer to get dressed than it does to get undressed.
Kelly sold Golden Dreams for $500. Another shot, A New Wrinkle, sold for $250. Over the next 2 years, the publishing company sold over $750,000 worth of calendars at 25 cents apiece. Marilyn's job was over in 3 hours. She spent her $50 and forgot about it. The rest of 1949 was lean. Ben Lyon helped her get a bit in a Fox musical, A Ticket to Tomahawk. But she had no dialogue, little screen time, and was paid very little. It didn't matter.
I didn't go into movies to make money. I wanted to become famous so that everybody would like me. I just want to be wonderful.
Love Happy was finally released in 1950. The producer sent Marilyn on a publicity tour, assuming reporters would be more interested in a beautiful blonde than three aging Marx Brothers. He was right.
I used to tell lies in my interviews, mostly about my mother and father. I was ashamed to have the world know my mother was in a mental institution, and that I had been born out of wedlock, and that I'd never even heard my father's voice.
At a screening of Love Happy for the William Morris Agency, Vice President Johnny Hyde was captivated by the blonde with Groucho.
Some men are following me.
Really? I can't understand why.
They met at a racket club in Palm Springs. Only 5'1", he was still one of the biggest agents in Hollywood.
We had some drinks and he listened when I talked. He said he had discovered Lana Turner and other stars and that I had far more than Lana, and it was a cinch I'd go far. I remember laughing because I couldn't even make enough to pay my phone bill.
Hyde fell deeply in love with Marilyn, lavished money and clothes on her, took her to posh parties to get her noticed. He saw her not as an actress, but a screen personality, like Theda Bara in the silent days, Jean Harlow in the 1930s, a personification of sex. Hyde's friend Joe Kirkwood was making a TV commercial. Hyde made sure Marilyn was in it.
This is the first car I ever owned. I call her Cynthia. She's going to have the best care a car ever had. Put Royal Triton in Cynthia's little tummy.
Right, lady.
Cynthia will just love that Royal Triton.
Hyde also paid for plastic surgery to reduce the tip of her nose. The physical transformation of Norma Jean into Marilyn Monroe was complete.
He was so sweet, but I just couldn't get excited about him. You know, I had all these ideas about tall, dark, and handsome. He wasn't. He had the best clothes in town, but they were like doll's clothes.
Johnny Hyde happened to be Mickey Rooney's agent, and Marilyn happened to get a bigger part in a B movie about roller derbies. The low budget meant she had to supply her own wardrobe, a black knit dress. At least it was a couple of days' work.
Characters you pick up.
She wore the same outfit in another low-budget film, Hometown Story. Director Arthur Pearson recalled her from The Dangerous Years and gave her plenty of screen time.
Morning, Iris.
Good morning, Mr. Haskins. Springer's Auto Supply called twice. They wanted someone to pick up the cuts for the Thursday ad. I told him you would do it, Mr. Haskins.
I'm a reporter, not an errand boy. What's the matter with Irwin?
He went down to Sears to see about a double page for their monthly sale, Mr. Haskins.
Okay, I'll do it. How long do you have to work around here before you stop calling me Mr. Haskins?
I always treat men with respect. Then they treat me with respect, Mr. Haskins.
Is that a proven theory or something you're just trying out?
Mr. Blake Washburn is looking for you. He asked for you 2 hours ago.
What's he doing here this early? Doesn't he know we don't wake up until afternoon around here?
He was here at 9 o'clock.
Are you still keeping company with that Hubert guy?
Yes, I am, Mr. Haskins.
Just ask him.
These are the personal letters, Mr. Washburn.
Few people outside of schoolrooms ever saw the film made by General Motors to sing the praises of big business. But MGM handled it, and Hyde wanted Marilyn's image seen at MGM, where John Huston was making a gangster thriller.
A friend of mine who was an agent, his name was Johnny Hyde, asked me if he might bring her to the studio and read for me for this picture that was coming up, The Asphalt Jungle. She gave a reading that was extraordinarily good. She was ideal. She was the girl. However, I had no notion that she was going to go on and be the star that she became.
Marilyn made this screen test with actor Richard Conte, reading a scene from a movie called Cold Shoulder.
And what did you come here for?
To tell you can't stay here. If those gorillas find you here, what happens to them? Nothing? They're just going to leave them alone? What's the matter with you, Benny? You can't take such a chance.
You dumb broad. You stupid little...
What's the matter?
They followed you here, or did you bring them with you? I ought to...
Go ahead. It won't be the first time I've been worked over today. I'm getting used to it. Where are you going? Benny.
Marilyn Monroe as Angela, the easy-living, green-eyed blonde.
What's the big idea standing there staring at me, Uncle Lon?
Don't call me Uncle Lon.
I thought you liked it.
Maybe I did. I don't anymore.
I had the market send over some salt mackerel for you. I know how you love it for breakfast.
Some sweet kid.
Haven't you bothered me enough, you big banana head? Just try breaking my door, and Mr. Emmerich will throw you out of the house.
He got her a tiny part in the MGM film Right Cross on the basis of Asphalt Jungle, but it wasn't even long enough for her to get screen credit. MGM wasn't buying blondes. They already had Lana Turner. Hyde left his wife and children. The 53-year-old agent told Marilyn truthfully that he only had a short time to live. If they married, she'd inherit nearly $1 million. Even old Joe Skank told her it was a good deal. Marilyn couldn't do it. She could sleep with someone for fun or friendship, but she could never marry for money.
Hollywood's a place where they'll pay you $1,000 for a kiss and 50 cents for your soul. I know, because I've turned down the first offer enough and held out for the 50 cents. Johnny was good, really good to me. He even wanted to get married. But after Jim, I just didn't want to get married unless I was head over heels in love. This wasn't it. It wasn't him, it was me. But he took it personally, and I had to act like it was the thrill of my life. I wish it had been.
Hyde finagled another small part for her in All About Eve.
Sable.
Sable? Did she say Sable or Gable?
Either one.
With the help of Natasha Lattès, Marilyn lifted the part of the ambitious showgirl out of the bimbo category.
Tell me this, do they have auditions for television?
That's all television is, my dear. Nothing but auditions.
The film received awards and attention, which meant the right people noticed Marilyn. By October, Hyde had negotiated a contract for Marilyn, beginning at $500 a week at 20th Century Fox, which had dropped her in 1947. Hyde made last-minute plans to include Marilyn in his will. They were never carried out. He died just before Christmas, 1951.
I loved him very dearly, but I wasn't in love with him. I was never used to being happy, so that wasn't something I ever took for granted.
Racked by loss and guilt, Marilyn overdosed on sleeping pills. Natasha rescued her. Within a month after losing Johnny Hyde, she began her new contract in As Young as You Feel.
You'll sneak 1,000 wolf whistles at Harry.
You know, as a rule, I never mix business and pleasure.
Yes, sir. Give me that file. Yes, sir.
Mr. McKinley, control yourself.
Go fry an egg.
Well.
On the set, she met playwright Arthur Miller, author of Death of a Salesman. At a party later that year, he didn't make a pass at her. She saw that as a rare show of respect. Actually, he was just terrified.
It was like running into a tree, you know? Like a cool drink when you've got a fever. You see my toe? This toe? Well, he sat and held my toe, and we just looked into each other's eyes all evening.
They wrote constantly over the next 5 years. Miller lived in New York. He was married with 2 small children.
Bewitch them with this image they ask for, but I hope and almost pray you won't be hurt in this game, nor ever change. Letter from Arthur Miller, 1952.
Miller wasn't the only one writing. A growing legion of fans requested autograph photos, 5,000 a week according to the studio, which quickly cast her in another film as another hot little blonde. The comedy was written by I.A.L. Diamond, who later wrote Some Like It Hot, but little about the film was memorable, except for the luminous blonde.
This is Bobby, an old Army buddy who just got back to her base of operations. Wow.
You know, all the time we were overseas, Jim talked of nothing but you.
You must have found that pretty dull.
Oh, no. Jim can make anything interesting.
Marilyn volunteered for anything that kept her in the public eye. Premieres, photo shoots, personal appearances, studio conventions.
I liked the fact that the salesman who came to Hollywood for a big studio sales rally whistled loudest and longest when I entered.
The studio quickly tossed her into another sexy comedy. Despite the money invested in making Marilyn a household name, Darryl Zanuck didn't mind loaning her out to RKO for Clash by Night. If she failed at a dramatic part, it would be RKO's problem, not Fox's. Marilyn and Keith Andes played second fiddle to the love triangle of Robert Ryan, Barbara Stanwyck, and Paul Douglas.
He's kind of exciting and attractive.
Who's attractive? Who's exciting?
Earl!
Who?
Joe, you're strangling me!
Who's attractive? Who's exciting?
You.
That's better.
Director Fritz Long shot on location on the California coast. The interiors were done back at RKO, which had to be bittersweet for Marilyn. Her mother had worked as an editor there, and Norma Jean could see the RKO building from the orphanage playground.
While I was at RKO, people kept calling up Jerry Wald, who was in charge of production, trying to blackmail him by saying they're going to break a story about me having posed nude for a calendar, and that would put the kiss of death on Clash by Night if Mr. Wald didn't do this and that for them. I was nervous for weeks.
Back at Fox, the studio added her to an all-star cast in another sexy comedy, We're Not Married.
The appointment was for January 1st, and this clown began marrying people before he had the authority.
The winner, Miss Mississippi.
You know her?
Yes, my fiancée. There's your mommy. There's your mommy.
Zanuck still felt she was more a personality than an actress. Best seen in lightweight comedy.
His idea was that no one would pay money to see me in a decent role. I would have been happy to do anything, you know, to get him to let me try something different. He wasn't interested at all. Every other guy was. Why wasn't he?
She simply wasn't Zanuck's style. He preferred promoting exotic types like Juliette Greco or Bella Darby.
I used to have nightmares about Mr. Zanuck. I used to wake up in the morning thinking I have to make Mr. Zanuck appreciate me. I couldn't get in to see him or anybody that counted. He told somebody in the front office that I was just a freak and he didn't want to waste his time on me. Studio bosses are jealous of their power like political bosses. They want to pick their own candidate. They don't want the public rising up and dumping a girl in their laps and saying, make her a star. If I am a star, the people made me a star. No studio, no person. The people did. When the studio first heard about the calendar, everybody was in a frenzy. This man telephoned me on the set and asked, "What's this about a calendar of you in the nude? Did you do it?" I have a sort of stupid sincerity, so I said, "Yes, is there anything wrong with that?" So they found out about the calendar. Well, what do you know?
He screamed, "Found out? There you are, all of you, in color!" Then he must have gotten mixed up because first he said, "Just deny everything." Then he said, "Don't say anything, I'll be right down." This worried man came tearing into my dressing room, wringing his hands, talking about this dreadful thing I had done.
So I said, I didn't think anybody would recognize me. When I said that, I thought he was going to have a stroke. A few weeks after the story came out, I knew that far from hurting me, it helped me. The public saw how poor I was not very long before. They also liked the calendar, by the millions.
Asking about the modeling session, one reporter asked if she had anything on. Marilyn nodded and said,
The radio.
Another reporter found Gladys Mortensen alive in a state asylum. Marilyn was not the orphan she claimed to be. But again, she disarmed a potential scandal with the truth, or at least a version of it.
Unknown to me as a child, my mother spent many years as an invalid in a state hospital. I haven't known my mother intimately, but since I've become grown up and been able to help her, I have contacted her. I am helping her and want to continue to help her when she needs me.
Marilyn paid for a rest home for her mother for the rest of her life. A gag publicity shot attracted the eye of baseball legend Joe DiMaggio. A girlfriend of Marilyn's set up a blind date.
I was afraid when I heard he was a ball player he might have slick black hair and wear flashy clothes, but he was very conservative. His hair had a touch of gray in it. I liked that, and I could see he was as shy as I was. No jokes that I remember. Not even any compliments.
Fox finally gave her a dramatic part. As the babysitter Nell in Don't Bother to Knock, she would play a woman on the brink of sanity. Working with Natasha Lattès, Marilyn created a character who was seductive yet confused, sleepwalking through life with moments of violence, depressed, lost, suicidal.
I think if I have one talent, it's observing. I hope that it adds up to acting. I hope to put it to good use.
She patterned the character after memories of her mother. Fate underlined the connection. The director's last name was Baker.
When I first went to America in 1950, the producer of it rang me up and said, "We've got this script, and will you read it?" and so on. Well, I read it, and I thought it was absolutely marvelous.
Marilyn's stage fright was so intense, she would vomit before coming onto the set and cower in her dressing room, keeping co-stars Anne Bancroft and Richard Widmark waiting.
I didn't like it, but professionally, if something collapses or goes wrong or somebody's ill or whatever, and then somebody else has to step in, and so I did.
Natasha Lattès remained on the set, coaching Marilyn through each scene.
I'm the guy in 821 across the court. Can I ask you a question?
Oh, I don't know. I suppose so. Are you sure you want me?
Yeah, you're the one I want, all right. You doing anything you couldn't be doing better with somebody else?
If you want.
Does that mean come on over?
One of the most important things you have to do is to support the supporting cast. Wherever you're dealing with a star, the same thing applies the other way around. You have to support the star vis-a-vis the supporting cast, because all of them have to be carefully nurtured according to their position in the story.
When I stepped into that room, I ran smack into an adventure you don't forget in a long time. Because the screen has never shown this kind of woman before. The kind that reaches out in the loneliness of the night to a stranger passing by. I should have seen the warning of danger in her eyes. But what happened in that suspense-filled night was about to change my entire life. Why didn't you tell me you were working here?
I'm not. I'm just doing it for tonight.
Yeah, I know. You're an heiress. Tomorrow morning, you ride through your estate. Side saddle.
She made you say that.
I can't figure you out. You're silk on one side and sandpaper on the other.
I'll be any way you want me to be.
Why? Why is it so important?
Because I belong with you. Pat, it's 8:09. I'm frightened. I think something's happened.
You all right?
Yes.
It was the part that she could get her teeth into, almost literally. And she did. She had a wonderful performance. It was theatrical, nearly quite over the top. And she did it very well, too.
Marilyn held her own in the wacky comedy Monkey Business with Cary Grant and Ginger Rogers.
I've done a lot of experimenting with this kind of thing.
You can come in now, if you're not too busy.
Miss Laura was just showing me her acetate.
Director Howard Hawks had made His Girl Friday, Bringing Up Baby, and I Was a Male War Bride. He commented to a co-worker, "I think the little blonde has possibilities." The dialogue even acknowledged Marilyn's main claim to fame.
By the way, whose lipstick is it?
What's her name? You know, Oxley's secretary.
Oh, you mean that little pin-up girl, huh? Very cute.
Sort of, but half infant.
Not the half that's visible.
Different story with Marilyn Monroe. She was being courted at the time by Joe DiMaggio, who was around, and when he wasn't there, Marilyn would get on the phone to him, and she would continue her conversations while take was going on, and the assistant coming to her, "Honey, get off the phone, we're shooting." And she just look at the assistant with those big eyes and go right on talking.
Hi, Dr. Fulton.
Hi.
What'd you say to her?
Mrs. Fulton, he said hi.
I heard what he said, you peroxide kissing bug.
Edwina, she didn't do anything.
I'll pull that blonde hair out by its black roots.
Edwina, please. Edwina,
Come
stop
on,
it.
come on,
Miss
come
Laura,
on.
you keep out of the way. Well, all set.
Is your motor running?
Is yours? Takes a while to warm up.
Does me too.
Promoting the film as Grand Marshal in a beauty contest parade in Atlantic City, her low-cut dress outraged some local officials.
I wasn't aware of any objectionable décolletage on my part. I noticed people looking at me all day, but I thought they were looking at my Grand Marshal badge.
She would intentionally exaggerate her makeup and costuming.
The only people I care about are the people in Times Square, across the street from the theater, who can't get close as I come in. If I had light makeup on, they'd never see me. This makeup is for them, so that when I wave to them, it will soften out in the distance across the square. Success came to me in a rush. It surprised my employers more than it did me. Even when I had only played bit parts in a few films, all the movie magazines and newspapers started printing my picture and giving me write-ups. Cheesecake helps call attention to you. The censor's office practically kills everything taken of me, and what the censor passes, the studio retouches. They spend a lot of time worrying whether a girl has cleavage or not. It seems to me they ought to worry if she doesn't have any.
Hugh Hefner, publisher of Playboy magazine.
She was a very striking lady, and then I think I got lost along the way. I could not have rewritten history any better than to have the very first Playmate of the month, Marilyn Monroe, because she defines that innocence and sexuality.
The studio used her fame to enliven O. Henry's Full House, with Marilyn as a Victorian streetwalker accosted by Charles Laughton. Fox then cast her as the seductive murderous tramp in the film noir Niagara, in which she upstaged one of America's natural wonders.
Take me in your arms.
She sang of love just as she lived for love, like a Lorelei, flaunting her charms as she lured men on and on to their eternal destruction.
Kiss me, hold me tight. Love me tonight.
Her own husband was no exception.
It's getting late. Hand me my slip.
I hate to move when we have a fight. Never want to leave your side.
Get me some orange juice, Georgie.
She insisted on actually being naked, even though she was covered by a sheet.
People have curious attitudes about nudity, just as they have about sex. Nudity and sex are the most commonplace things in the world. Yet people act as if they were things that existed only on Mars.
And parading around showing herself off in that dress, cut down so low in front you could see her kneecaps.
She's a pretty girl. Why hide it?
Don't worry about that. She'd like to wear that dress where everybody could see her, right in the middle of the Yankee Stadium. Smell like a dime store. I know what that means.
Sure. I'm meeting somebody. Just anybody handy, as long as he's a man.
But she could never be his, nor any man's, completely. And that thought whipped him into a frenzy that makes the screen thunder with unparalleled suspense.
Hello, please.
She borrowed the red dress from Niagara for a party in her honor at which Mickey Rooney showed up to play drums.
I feel as though it's all happening to someone right next to me. I'm so close I can feel it. I can hear it, but it isn't really me.
Fox bought the play Gentlemen Prefer Blondes for Betty Grable, But now she had been replaced as the studio's hottest blonde. Marilyn's habitual tardiness to the set and her continued reliance on Natasha Lattès drove director Howard Hawks crazy. But since he worked with her in Monkey Business, there had been a major change. Now, she was a star.
We're just two little girls from Little Rock. We lived on the wrong side of the tracks.
But little rocks or square rocks, these gals must have their rocks. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
I remember when I got the part in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Jane Russell, she was the brunette in it, and I was the blonde. She got $200,000 for that movie, and I got my $500 a week. But that to me was, you know, considerable.
I just love finding new places to wear diamonds.
Jane Russell, by the way, was quite wonderful to me. It turned out we went to the same high school.
Mr. Esmond and I are going to be married.
To each other?
Of course to each other. Who else to?
Well, I don't know about you guys. I always sort of figured Lorelei would end up with the Secretary of the Treasury.
My little angel, you don't even know there's a certain kind of gal would take advantage of a situation of this sort. May I kiss your hand?
I always say a kiss on the hand feels very good, but a diamond tiara lasts forever.
The only thing was, I couldn't get a dressing room because they still kept saying, "You're not a star." I said finally, I really got to this kind of level. I said, look, after all, it's called Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And whatever I am the blonde.
Culture fan, ain't there anyone here for love? When love goes wrong, nothing goes right.
The film gave her a signature song, imitated many times over the decades, but never equaled.
Men grow cold as girls grow old, and we all lose our charms in the end. But square cut or pear shape, these rocks don't lose their shape. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
When Jane and I were asked to put our footprints in front of Groman's Chinese along with the dent of Jimmy Durante's nose and Betty Grable's legs, I suggested to Jane that she lean over the wet cement and that I sit down in it, and we could leave our prints that way. They didn't like that idea. I did have a funny feeling when I finally put my foot down into wet cement. I sure knew what it really meant to me. Anything's possible.
To lure America away from TV sets, Fox introduced CinemaScope. It had worked for a big costume epic called The Robe, but the second widescreen film was a smaller comedy about three girls trying to land rich husbands. People expected sparks to fly between Fox's former queen blonde and the new star. They were wrong. Betty Grable said to Marilyn, "Honey, I've had mine. It's all yours now."
The director was John Negulesco, and when I asked him, what's the motivation of my character, he said, "You're blind as a bat without your glasses. That's your motivation."
Do you know who I'd like to marry? Who? Rockefeller.
Which one?
I don't care.
I guess this was just about the happiest night of my life. Somehow it's like when I was a little girl and I pretended wonderful things were happening to me. Now they are.
To promote the film, she appeared on national TV with Jack Benny.
You know, I made a picture once. The horn blows at midnight. And I believe if that had been made in CinemaScope, it would have been a huge success.
Well, you know, CinemaScope is very complicated. In order to put the big screen in all the theaters, they have to take out a lot of seats.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my picture, they could have taken out all of the seats.
Jack,
What?
I don't know why you're always panning The Horn Blows at Midnight. I saw it.
You did?
Yes.
And you don't know why I'm panning it? Did you like it?
No.
Why did you want to leave me?
Because I can't trust myself with you.
What?
You're so strong and I'm so weak. And when you look at me with those big blue eyes, I just...
I understand.
It was an all-star cast, but there was no doubt who audiences came to see. All over America, all over the world, Marilyn Monroe was the movie star. At the 1953 Photoplay Awards, Marilyn arrived in a gold lame gown so tight she had to be sewn in.
Marilyn Monroe, it gives me the greatest pleasure to present the famous Photoplay magazine Gold Medal Award as the selection of all of the moviegoers of America who have voted you the most popular actress of the year. My congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. I want to thank the editors of Photoplay magazine and all of the public. I thank you very much.
She upstaged screen legend Joan Crawford, who was none too happy.
That was the most shocking display of bad taste I'd ever seen. Look, there's nothing wrong with my tits, but I don't go throwing them in other people's faces. Kids don't like her. Miss Monroe is making the mistake of believing her own publicity.
Marilyn knew enough Hollywood gossip to turn the other cheek, with a big wink.
The thing that hit me hardest about Miss Crawford's story is that it came from her. I've always admired her for being such a wonderful mother, for taking 4 children and giving them a fine home.
No wire hangers ever!
Joan Crawford never spoke out publicly against Marilyn again.
He's worth a fancy fortune, but it's not in cash. I'm gonna file my claim. I got the fever, ooh, the fever, but not for gold in the ground.
The studio cast Marilyn as a saloon singer thrown together with He-Man Robert Mitchum. Ironically, Bob Mitchum had worked with Jim Doherty at a defense plant in 1943.
We were in Canada for a month and a half. Bob Mitchum is one of the most sensitive people deep down. I think he could be a poet. You never lose sight of the truth with him, of how things really are. He shocks a lot of people, but what he says is the truth.
All right, lie down. On your face. Come on, come on.
Joe DiMaggio's presence on location was a big comfort to her.
He's honest, almost childishly so. He sizes up people very quickly. He has a silent reserve I can't do anything about. I wish I understood it better. It gives him magnetism. I also want to tell you he has a great heart.
Sometimes it's peaceful, and sometimes wild and free. Love is a traveler on the river of no return.
Director Otto Preminger's insistence on reality put his stars in peril. During the rafting scene, Mitchum and Monroe nearly capsized.
The Indians call it the River of No Return. From here on, you'll find out why.
Frustrated with Natasha Lattès constantly second-guessing his direction of Monroe, Preminger barred her from the set. Marilyn faked a sprained ankle to get her way. Zanuck countermanded Preminger's order to keep Marilyn happy. Natasha Lattès remained on the set.
cinemascope conscious. It was pushing the scenery instead of the actors or actresses. A taxi driver said to me, "Why did they put you in that stinker, River of No Return?" Good question. I'm with the taxi driver. I think I deserve better than a Z cowboy movie.
Fox scheduled her for The Girl in Pink Tights to co-star Frank Sinatra.
That's the cheapest character I ever read in a script. What's the use of being a star if you have to play something you're ashamed of? Some people have more scope than other people think they have.
She refused to do the film. The studio put her on suspension. Abruptly, she agreed to marry Joe. He expected her to settle down.
When a well-known honeymoon couple arrives at Tokyo Airport, a throng of 4,000 baseball and movie fans surge out of control. The former Yankee slugger and his picture bride escape into the car and head for the safety of their hotel, where the public was barred, but the photographers and reporters more than made up for that. Their questions were rough, ranging from the risque to the ridiculous. And Joe, he's the forgotten man, which is something in Japan where baseball is so popular. But enough's enough. His patience is exhausted, and Joe says, go.
Joe's business kept him busy in Japan. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army asked her to visit the troops in Korea. Arctic winds howled through the makeshift amphitheaters. It snowed. It was near freezing.
I didn't feel a thing except good. I never believed all the fan mail I got was real until I sang for the troops in Korea. Wow, they really liked me.
The diamonds are a girl's best friend. A good lady friend. But it won't pay the rent all on your humble flat. Or help you at the automat. Men grow old, girls grow old, and we all lose our charms in the end. When cut or tear, safety's run, don't lose that day. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
I wasn't afraid because I felt every person in that audience was my friend. For the first time in my life, I had the feeling that people accepted me and liked me. I don't know why you boys are always getting so excited about sweater girls. Take away their sweaters and what have you got?
When Army brass tried to monopolize her time, Marilyn insisted that all meals be in a mess hall so she could be with the enlisted men. They were the reason she was there in the first place.
This was the best thing that ever happened to me. I only wish I could have seen more of the boys, all of them. I told them to come see us in San Francisco.
By the time she flew back to Japan, she had pneumonia and a fever of 104. Joe spent 4 days nursing her back to health. They settled in Joe's adopted hometown, San Francisco, but domestic life didn't appeal to her.
I'd always been a nothing, a nobody. Then I had a chance to be somebody. I couldn't give it up just when things were looking good for me. Not just be a housewife, even Joe's housewife. I had to see if I could be a success on my own.
DiMaggio thought most of Marilyn's friends were phonies. At the top of the list was Natasha Lattès.
I was so confused back then. Natasha wasn't like a guy, you know. Have a good time and that's that. She really got jealous about the men I saw. Everything. She thought she was my husband. She was a great teacher, but that part of it ruined things for us. I got scared of her. I had to get away.
As with her divorce from Jim Doherty, Marilyn handled the separation impersonally by mail. More and more, Joe would be alone at his restaurant. Even when they were together, they scarcely spoke.
Joe distrusted everybody in Hollywood except his pal Frank Sinatra. He spent all day in front of the TV set watching some game or other. He went for days without even speaking to me. He's the moodiest man I ever met.
Her studio bought The 7-Year Itch, a hit Broadway comedy. Marilyn wanted to do it, so she put up no resistance to There's No Business Like Show Business, in which she played another seductive opportunist. Her co-stars, all veteran performers, had little patience with her late arrivals and continued stage fright.
I guess people think that why I'm late is some kind of arrogance, and I think it's the opposite of arrogance. I want to be prepared when I get there to give a good performance.
The showstopper of the film was a steamy version of Heat Wave. Her Carmen Miranda outfit exposed her midriff, but not her belly button.
Having a heat wave, a tropical heat wave.
The production code doesn't even allow people to show their navels, you know? I don't even think oranges have the right to show theirs.
Songwriter Irving Berlin thought her version was terrific. Joe DiMaggio didn't. Marilyn took refuge with costume designer Bill Travilla.
I don't want him to see me this way. If I go crazy, please take me away and hide me. He didn't like the women I played on screen. He said they were sluts. He didn't like actors kissing me. He hated all my clothes. He said they were too tight and attracted the wrong kind of attention. When I told him it was part of the job, he said I should quit.
Impressed with a photography of Milton Green, she discussed her plight with him.
They tell you to cry one tear, and if you feel two, it's no good. They treat you like a machine, a money machine. I know how much money they're making on my movies. They're screwing me with that salary, and I don't like getting screwed. My work is the only ground I've ever had to stand on. To put it bluntly, I have a whole superstructure with no foundation. But I'm working on that. I'm a Gemini. That means intellect. Jekyll and Hyde. 2 in 1. Sometimes I wish it were just me.
Imitations, clones, and would-be Marilyns sprang up at every studio in Hollywood. Mamie Van Doren, Diana Dors, Joy Lansing, Irish McKella, and 100 others with platinum hair and forgotten names. George Axelrod satirized Marilyn in Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, with Jane Mansfield as a brainless sex star with artistic pretensions who uses an intellectual to make her muscle-bound husband jealous. A film version was produced by Marilyn's own studio, 20th Century Fox. Marilyn's old friend from Love Happy even played a cameo.
Rita, I love you.
Oh, and I love you, Georgie. But why did you wait so long to tell me? You know, you never even tried to kiss me.
I never could get that close.
You got it made.
An 8mm film circulated for years as the secret nudie movie of Marilyn Monroe. It was a look-alike named Arlene Hunter. People wanted to believe the worst.
I've been up against this sort of thing before. People have a habit of looking at me as if I were some kind of mirror instead of a person. They didn't see me, they saw their own dirty thoughts. Then they white-masked themselves by calling me the dirty one. My fight with 20th Century Fox isn't about money, it's about human rights. I'm tired of being known as the girl with the shape. I'm going to show them I'm capable of deeper acting. I want to get in touch with my real feelings, not only in life, but in the movies, too.
Marilyn was still capable of very outrageous behavior. For producer Mike Todd, she rode a pink elephant at a Madison Square Garden Gala for Around the World in 80 Days.
We even went to the movies, by the way, in our mink coats with nothing